for Strike Guard. When I was given the script to voice Strike Guard, before I even hit the studio, I had to work out. I was doing a few workouts. I wanted to get that superhero physique, because at the times when you're standing, you're voicing, and you know you're facing off a villain, you have to give that superhero posture. So I wanted to feel like I'm facing off of an actual villain. If you have the passion to create, let that be your driving force. This is one of those moments I say, animations, cartoons, is not that there are some for children, and there are some I will not let children watch. This one is one of those animations I will not let children watch. The storytelling in this case influences how even the voice actors would represent these characters. For those getting into animation voiceover, embrace your weird, live it, be it. Well, like you mentioned, yes, I do have like a couple of voices at the back of my head, just waiting to unleash. Let's not talk about it too much before someone says I have multiple personality disorder. That's not it. That is totally not it. Before you even get to how best you feel you can deliver this character, is what the casting director says to do, you're going to work towards.
Everything Voiceovers podcast, African perspective. It's T Code here, your host for another exciting episode, officially episode 58. Wow, it's been such a journey. And yeah, I can't wait for us to get into today's conversation. Sadly, it's just going to be me today again. Sarah, unfortunately, is not around. She has some running arounds to do in Abuja. But, well, that's why we're two. So I am here, and I'm not here alone. If you listen to the last episode of the podcast, you realize that we were meant to have a guest, but then Nigeria happened to us. The network was terrible, and our guest couldn't, join through the conversation. So it just was me and Sarah then talking about surviving Nigeria as voiceover artists. And it was such an interesting episode because we had to share all of our experiences from electricity to internet, to all the challenges that we face really as voiceover artists. And we had a lot of recommendations because we've been going through these things as full-time voiceover artists, and we've been able to find ways to go around these challenges. So I'd recommend anybody listening right now, go listen to that episode if you want to know how to survive Nigeria as a voiceover artist. But today's conversation is quite different because I've got someone who is in love with the world of comic books and animation. So we're having a rather different conversation. We also have in the previous episode of the podcast. Now, the person I'm about to introduce to you guys is a friend. So first of all, we go way back from, in fact, let me not even formalize all of these things with some gang. We're just gonna track back to how we started back then, right?
Of course.
And I think the first time I met him, the first time I met you was in 2021. That was at the Nigerian voice acting contest.
Yes.
Yeah, it was one of the contestants, like I was. And it was one of those guys that I would watch and I'm like, oh, more, this guy is likely going to win this contest too. Because he had a lot of energy. He had charisma. He had character in his voice. So I was looking at him. I was looking at Emeka Onunkwo. I can't remember any other person than the two of them that really caught my attention from the get-go. I think there was one other guy like that, but they yanked him off pretty quick. So I was like, man, this dude, right? And at the end of the day, the three of us ended up being winner, first runner-up, and second runner-up. And my brother right here, Ace Wondaz, who is an amazing voiceover artist. Yeah, an amazing voiceover artist, a multi-award-winning voiceover artist for that matter, and a podcaster, the host of the Com Nerdic podcast, is here with me today. It was the second runner-up, and it's such a privilege to have him many years later as my guest, doing incredible stuff in the voiceover world. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Ace Wondaz.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome,
you.
Man. Yeah, your name. Let's start from your name, for God's sake. Like,
I think that'll be the first question.
yeah, right. Because first off, the name is really cool. I gotta say. It was last week. Sarah was like, she can't even call you Charles anymore because Ace Wonders just sounded pretty cool to the ears. And by the way, guys, we're going to be talking about what Ace is onto. We're going to be talking about comics and animation and that world and how it relates with voiceover. So, Ace Wonders, why? How did you come about that name?
Okay. I, I would say that the thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for having me on this podcast. I really appreciate it. I've been every time I tune into you put out the new episode, I'm like, what am I gonna be in this podcast? But yeah, here, thank you very much. And
Yeah.
the name Ace Wonders, it's kind of kicked off from my love of animations, and it's birthed from the Bat family basically. It was born from specifically uh, Dick Grayson. He used to be known as the Boy Wonder. That's Robin and the Boy Wonder. And I first went with the Boy Wonder. I was like, boy, he's gonna grow one day. So I needed something more unique. And Ace kind of like started kicking it at some point. And I was like, I kind of still like the Wonder. I like that in the name, so I just kind of merged the Ace and the Wonders. And for some reason, at some point, I just liked the name Ace, and I was trying to make sense of adding my names to make the Ace make sense. So I was like, Akano Charles Extraordinary.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So you've got Ace, which is for your name, and Wonders from Dick Grayson, from that's
Yes.
DC Comics. Uh,
Yes.
it
The Nightwing.
eventually became Nightwing, right? From the first
Yes.
Robin becoming Nightwing, right? I followed that story watching what's the name of that?
I think it's from the Boy Wonder to Ace Wonders. It's still kind of my Robin to Nightwing.
Yes. I like this hero story. Really cool. I have a feeling that someday in the future you're gonna have a comic book for yourself, Ace Wonders, and I'll be so proud of you. Like I really want to read your comic book. That's just by the way. But it's quite interesting how you take interest.
Oh
in comic.
yes.
Yeah, it's quite interesting how you've taken interest in comic books. Tell me about your journey into the world of animation. How did it all start?
I would say my interest
you
in comic
interested?
books has spanned close to 15 years now. In the world of DC and Marvel, but before I even came across that, I and my brother used to write stories of certain superheroes, and we were just making up our own superheroes. And it came to the point where we started writing certain stories, and eventually, when I found out that some characters that I had already originally written were already in existence, I was much younger and not as knowledgeable as I am right now. They've been running for over 80 years. There was no way they copied me. So the idea of this characters, and I just got into DC and Marvel. It was very fascinating, and also got into Dark Horse comics as well. That's for the Umbrella Academy. I think that would be the first comic book I owned. The Umbrella Academy was the first comic book I owned, and it was very interesting until I moved from Imo State to Abuja, and then I lost that particular comic. I've been trying to collect more lately.
That's interesting, bro. Honestly, I wish we had that strong comic book community in Nigeria. I think, well, now that the young ones, I mean, then we were kids looking to
Yeah.
have comic book, but it was almost not available. We could only find things like Super Strikers. That was like the very
Yes.
comic.
Yes.
And
Speaking of that,
yeah, go on.
I'm just realized. Okay, yes, that was Dark Horse was the first comic book I owned, but I believe the first superhero story I actually read as like a graphic novel would be Black Thunder. I don't know if you remember Black Thunder. It was at the time when Super Strikers was all the rage. I could share that with you. I had to find the company. Mego Comics. I had to find them, mail them, and tell me, "Yo, I need a copy of this comic. Give it to me." So I bought two issues of the comics, and it's been, although it's the similarity to this character is more akin to Shazam, but I would say he's more Nigerian than even Shazam. The only similarity they have is just the lightning powers into Nigerian superhero comics. But the comic genre had been, we've spanned across that with Super Strikers and Black Lightning and Black Thunder Rider, rather.
Wow, that's really cool. That reminds me of Black Swan. That was one of also those comics that I got early access to. I think I had. I mean, looking at it now, thinking about it, I had some folks in secondary school that would just bring some comics to class. So I saw Captain America, Incredible Hulk. I saw a lot of Spider-Man. I don't know how Spider-Man was just making its way
Spider-Man was
into.
so popular.
Yeah, I saw a lot of Spider-Man and Black Swan. And you know the interesting thing for me about comics, right? I draw. So it was, I think one of the most impressive thing I had done in my life when it comes to drawing was, I remember one time when there was this story about Superman versus the Incredible Hulk. It was a cartoon actually. My father bought the cartoon CD, and so I'd watched it a lot of times and I felt I was getting bored. So the next thing I did was I made the comic from that cartoon. So I literally like page by page, like I would I don't know how to explain it, but I segmented my book and I would pause while watching TV, and I'll pause and I'll draw what was exactly on screen and put it on the book and write what they said. So I created a story, like a quick summary of, and it was just amazing. I think that book, it didn't spend 2 days after the production was completed, because when I was done, I took it downstairs to show everybody. Like, we lived in a big compound with different neighbors and many kids. So I was excited and everybody was reading it. I didn't know how it got missing and I never found it again. So it was really painful. But that's one of the work I'm most proud of. It was like I created a comic book. I mean, but that was interesting. Anyway, we can go on and on talking about our comic book fantasies, but we're voiceover artists today, and no doubt our world, our experiences, reading comics, watching animation, cartoons, has really, really influenced our passion and interest in the animation side of things. So give me a story about your foray, your entrance into the animation voiceover system. Because truth be told, you're one of those who, I mean, you talk about animation most of the time, and I've heard your performance and it's like outstanding, right? I listened to one of the demos that you was produced for you. Like, was it like a year ago or 2 years ago?
I think it was a year ago.
Okay, a year ago. And that animation was just so on point. I mean, the demo reel was just so on point. So you've really got that stuff. So how did you get into that space when it's such a tough space in Nigeria? Not just because of the barrier of entry, but because you rarely even find animation stories to begin with.
Yes, I would say for me, the animation space in Nigeria, or my entrance into the animation space in Nigeria, was birthed from, like you mentioned, there. And obviously, as growing up, we wanted to, because of the lack of it over here, well, lack thereof, sort of, over here. We're still going to talk about the fact that there have been rising animated stories over here, but at the point when we had started, I was gunning for the big guns. Let's go for Disney, and let's go for Pixar animations. Let's do those. But the unfortunate part of trying to get into this side is obviously the part of the world that we are on. It takes a while before we get noticed here. So hence the internet. I took out my time to write that demo that you talked about, and a couple of sometimes I did originally put out animated films like The Lion King. That was one of my favorite animated films. I would talk about it from now till tomorrow. I just put out my own side of what I think my best rendition of this particular character would look like if I was. That was part of my entry into it. But I would say my entry into animation has just been, I don't know how to watch live action films. It's very difficult for me to watch live action films. But if you say it's animation, bring it. I'll watch it.
Well, that's interesting. So it was just your passion for it, and you studied that system for a while. But then,
Yes.
I mean, because to be honest, we are just at the beginning of the rise of the animation industry. So there weren't stuff before then. So from what you're saying, what I can gather is that your demo really played a significant role for you bagging animation gigs. So tell us about the animation voiceovers that you had the opportunity to be a part of.
Okay. For one, the major one that is already out at the moment, Spoof Animations. That would be that I would say that is like a childhood dream come true. You know, being your own superhero. And come out and then kids out, yeah, I'm a superhero. So that would be the first. That's the first project that is out. Another, and it was very very spectacular working on that particular character, stepping into, like we had mentioned, it's our entry into animations and the superhero genre has mostly been from the West. So stepping into being a Nigerian superhero, becoming one that is closer to home, is a whole different mindset shift. It's it's a very wonderful experience, I must tell you. And the second one um is a video game character. I can talk about it because yeah, he gave me permission to talk about it. I can talk about it. The game is not out yet, but it's still in development. Um, it's a space bounty hunter, Voodoo Games, Voodoo from Juju Games rather. The name of the character is Baz Reeves. So I'm playing the character in the video games, and that's the second voiceover character. The voice another character that I've voiced in recent times. The other ones really can't talk about right now because
There's no works.
yes.
Let me ask you a question. Do you develop, like, you have a set of voices ready that you've developed, or and then so when you see the character, you just know which of the voices you're picking from, or when you're faced with a particular character, it forces you to create a voice from scratch, a vocal character from scratch. How do you approach getting the right voice for the right character?
Well, like you mentioned, yes, I do have like a couple of voices at the back of my head, just waiting to unleash. I call it that. I wouldn't even say the voices. They're like different persons entirely. But but let's not talk about it too much before someone says I have multiple personality disorder. That's not it. That is totally not it. But when it comes down to voicing certain characters, you and I know this. Regardless of how best, before you even get to how best you feel you can deliver this character, is what the casting director says to do. You're going to work towards. I take that knowledge, and to the best of my knowledge, and maybe a few characters that's, like I said, that's in the back of my head, just sift through, okay, this one is closest to this particular character, let's do this. And sometimes when I don't have a character that is in close resemblance to the new project, I have to go learn. You can hear from my tone, obviously I don't have an inkling of a Yoruba accent. I think a couple of years back, that was when, yeah, I think that, yes, I did speak to you about it at that time when the casting for Yanu came out. Yeah, I had to go learn to speak with the Yoruba accent. Well, unfortunately, I didn't get the cast, but that was part of the work I had to go through. I had to learn. I studied. The brain work was there. I'm trying to play a child in a Yoruba child or a Yoruba teenager, basically. But the most people that were around me were older and they're middle aged. But I was like, no, I can't. This character does not. The way older people would speak is not the way a younger fellow would speak. So I had to look out for a couple of younger Yoruba kids around me to learn how they were speaking, especially in the tone of speaking to their fellow when I say youngling and speaking to an adult, the tones are different. The tone of respect is different from the tone that you speak to someone about your age. So I had to pay attention to all of that. I had to learn that, especially with the tone and the accent. So it's boils down to learning a whole different personality altogether. And I believe that's what makes the project or the character come to life, because I have to really, really envelop and get myself into that character. Speaking of the fact of for Strike Guard, when I was given the script to voice Strike Guard, before I even hit the studio, I had to work out. I was doing a few workouts. I wanted to get that superhero physique.
Yeah.
I had to do all of that to get into the superhero physique of, because at the times when you're standing, you're voicing, and you know you're facing up a villain, and you have to give that superhero posture. So I wanted to feel like that. I wanted to feel like I'm facing off of an actual villain. And the best way to do that is to actually be in the physical uh, form to do that. So it's not just even in the studying the character. A lot of times it's also being in it's just the state of mind. Basically, the state of mind is what's mostly important.
Okay, so thank you for that. The state of mind is really important, and from what you've said, what you try to do is to bring your body. First of all, have your mind in that state, then bring your body and your entire being to get to that state where you are potentially the character, right? And
Yes,
you enter into the studio feeling like you're that superhero. So it's not
yes,
like you're trying to think about how you're just like the superhero. You have the persona. You have, I think, is it
yes,
called method acting? I think that's what
yes.
it's
It's method
called.
acting.
Yeah, method acting. So let's talk about another thing that is important, and I like to emphasize this a lot because I try to study things deeper than the surface. I have always talked about the language and accents and this and that. Let me start with this question. Do you think Nigerian animations are doing enough to represent the Nigerian reality?
Okay. Um, I do have a weirdly different opinion about that. I wouldn't say it wouldn't be weird actually, but it's just a different opinion about that. I think, in my opinion, let's take because I believe the idea of trying to represent the Nigerian reality is what a lot of animators who are coming from this climb are trying to do. But I feel like we shouldn't be doing that. Let's take anime for example. And nowhere in Japanese history did a 100 feet tall kaiju demon come out from the ocean, and the Japanese government is building another 100 foot tall robot to fight these monsters. We've seen history, we have seen the news. That has never happened. But a lot of times when it comes to anime, the idea is a bit abstract from what reality is. Yes, there are samurais. There are elements of the Japanese culture that you would find in anime. There are samurais in Japanese history, but there was no samurai in Japanese history that could take by just one sword swing and cut down an entire mountain. So in trying to tell Nigerian stories, I feel like we shouldn't stay too much on it. We could use elements from the Nigerian stories and blow it out of proportion. We could take let's use the story of a lot of us. Any Nigerian listening to this that have been to boarding school, they must have heard the story of Miss Koi Koi. And if anybody who is using this story, please, you could also give me rights to this if you get inspiration from this particular story. So let's say Miss Koi Koi from the boarding school stories, and an animator wants to tell a story like that. You could take this particular lady and make her there, because all we just hear is the footsteps. Nobody has actually ever seen her. But if you're animating this particular story, you could make her an 8 foot tall, very, very beautiful lady, but she looks beautiful from behind. But when you look at her, she is so terrifying that the aura could just envelope you. That is a different way to tell this story. Do you get? Now, it could be like an entire demon lady who was trying to get revenge from something, but the story is, you're using a Nigerian element, a Nigerian storytelling element here, something from our reality in this case, and just go nuts with it. So that's my opinion. I understand that we're trying to do that and tell Nigerian stories. And a lot of the challenges that I feel from, I'm gonna get a bit political here. When it comes down to the superhero side of the stories that we put out for Nigeria, I feel like our superhero stories wouldn't be the same as our Western counterparts, because our politics is different. Our problems are different. If we were to have superheroes, they should be more vigilantes than even superheroes.
Fighting Boko Haram
They
and the
should be
rest.
more on the vigilante side than superheroes. You get what I mean? Because our problems are more unique to us. So if we really want to tell, okay, these are the sufferings that are happening. You know what? I feel like the best way to even tell I'm not selling this one is, I know I've been giving disclaimer since, but this one is just a major disclaimer. Anybody who's getting inspired from this particular story, it's on you. I feel like our Nigerian stories should be more like Arrow, the CW show Arrow from the first season, when he was just going again after some very notable people in their society. That should be what a Nigerian superhero should be like. Again, I am not inspiring nobody.
Okay. So I like the fact that, I mean, you're able to respond in this manner, and it's very intentional that I asked you these questions because I wanted us to have that as a foundation to answering questions about the voiceover aspect of things. The reason why I
Yes.
asked is that if our animations are hugely influenced by Western animation, right? Back to the story,
Yes.
like we are trying to portray another type of Superman and stuff like that. That goes a long way to also influence
The voice acting.
the voice acting, right? And you begin to watch this. First of all, visually, what looks like you is the color and probably the landscape, but the persona, the
Is
charisma
different.
of the character is different. You can literally just replace the person's skin color and the person's attire with a Superman, and it still works. So a voice actor trying to take on that role is likely, depending on the direction given, though, but it's
Yes.
easier to insert a Superman voice character, a Spider-Man voice character. Like, there's a way. Okay, for instance, we were watching, we read a lot of Spider-Man and watched the cartoon and all of that. The high school experiences that influenced Spider-Man's personality is not the same as what we have here. If you're
Yes.
gonna take a teenage boy beaten by a robot, the way he thinks is not the same way Spider-Man would think. The kind of challenges that he would have, the kind of friends that he would have, the kind of conversations that they would
You would
have,
have
right?
is completely different.
Yeah. So, but by the time you look at the story, the script, and the script begins to carry elements of the West, like there's a conflict in you as a voice actor to either stick to your local language and the richness of the accent, or to tilt towards the West, right? Because again, the script speaks to you. If you're
Yes.
having scripts that has a lot of military imprint and the feds and uh, you know things that aren't really you know
Very
tangible.
Nigerian.
So I had to ask that question, first of all. But let's really talk about the big issue here now, right? I don't know how to ask this question because you know why it's hard for me.
All
It
right.
has a lot to do with the animators themselves.
Yes.
Ianu, Ianu is such a big deal for many of us, or if not all of us who worked on that project, because it allowed us to be as Nigerian as we could be. Like there was no, you would hear us as our Nigerian self. And of course, it had the superhero element of it. It had, but it was really African. So it's hard for me to blame the voice actors without actually blaming the animators. But do you think there's a justification for it? I, by the way, let me just give a bit of context. I recall when Yanu's audition, was out, and to be very candid with you, the first audition scripts, because I also auditioned for a couple of characters, they weren't 100% Nigerian in the way they were written. They had some elements of the West. And I recall talking about this in a clubhouse meeting, right, with some of the Nigerian voiceover artists. And I was telling about how, this is not mirroring the young Nigerian 7, 8-year-old child, 12-year-old child. This sounds like, this is not how they would talk, right? But good enough, these things were corrected. And wow, it seems like I'm the only one on the live right now. I mean, on the podcast. Ace is not here thanks to the internet. But guys, we have to continue. Anyway, since Ace is not here for me to ask the question, I'm just gonna like run you through what I am saying. So the point I'm trying to make is that I think it's really important for us to be able to solve the issue of misrepresentation or lack of authentic representation, if I use that word. The animators need to be more in touch with the reality of the Nigerian space for many reasons. And these are just my thoughts because at the end of the day, right, creators have that creative license to be inspired by whatever, wherever, wherever, and create stuff. So we can't really, we can't really say they shouldn't create what they're going to create. But this is me speaking as someone who is very Pan-African, who cares about, how Africa is being represented, and also care about the voiceover space. Because you see, it's easier for an animator to be able to draw, sculpt out a persona that is not Nigerian because it's drawing. You literally can see it. You have a feel of how it should go. But when it comes to voiceover, it's not as easy because a voiceover artist, if the person is going to enter into the character that is not entirely Nigerian, the person has to also assume accents that are slightly different from Nigerian, and that's a different way entirely. And when you produce a project, a cartoon, an animation in that sense, who is the target audience is what we start asking ourselves. If the Nigerian kids see the movie or the character, right, the animation, and they don't feel connected to it, if the American kid doesn't really feel, of course, this is not an American accent, but then the person or the West starts to have a wrong perception about what we sound like. All right. So I have a strong feeling that we need to do better. Our creators, comic book creators, but of course, comic book is comic book. We're talking animation now, right? We need to do better to properly represent our nationality. But truth be told, right, we're doing fair. We're doing fair enough. While I am talking about the animators, I need to also talk about the voiceover artists because as it applies to the animators, it also applies to the voiceover artists. It's important for up and coming voiceover artists, like I've always said, to ensure that they are able to represent comic in their indigenous tongue Because if we want to like dig into the origin of what comic animation storytelling is, it has to do with how certain people from a particular culture express and react to humor. Hi, Ace.
I'm so
You know,
sorry. My
welcome back.
phone began to overheat and it just went off.
Ooh, I know that thing, right? Well, I'm going to try as much as I can to ensure that we wrap this up quick enough. So
All right.
I was saying something before you came back, and I was trying to like go into the foundation and element of what animation is. And one of the things I said is that animation, comic, and animation is like an offshoot of comic because it started from drawing before
Yes.
they began to animate those characters in the drawing, right? So if you look at it from that angle, comic expression that of course, people had been drawing things from inception, but it became mainstream with the rise of Walt Disney, right, in the
Yes.
US. So that niche was comic per se, right? And comic, in my own opinion, is the way certain people from a particular culture create and respond to humor. So you would, even the way they laugh okay, like maybe Flintstones, now you hear yabba-dabby-doo. That is not Nigerian. That
Obviously.
is, yeah, but if you go to that culture, it's you like there's just a lot of things that are just unique to the culture that those comic books come from, those animation come from. So the question is, what is unique to our own culture, right? So if we want to like respect in its entirety what comic means, we need to look inward and find our own humor and represent it on our screens. And that is why early comic or early animations rather in Nigeria, like Area, if you remember,
Yes.
which is a creation of I've forgotten the person's name, in collaboration with Remi Olutimaya, who was
Ajebo.
the voice actor. No,
I think
Ajabo
it
was
was
even a
Ajebo.
different one. Ajabo was another one that came after Area. Area was the first one, and Remi
Yes,
was the
Area was
voice
before. I
actor.
was after Ajebo. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So Ajabo Comics, right? So that was because that was mirroring our own humor. Like, hey, Oga, please, my wife don't just born, Oga, no, do I'm again. You know, things like that. That's Nigerian humor. If you go to stand-up comedy in Nigeria, it's very Nigerian. It's our reality. You get me? So
Yes.
there's this guy killing it right now. What's his name now? Jude Osi.
Judo C.
There's Jude Osi.
I forget that I've actually been on a project with Jude?
Oh man, that's
I didn't
amazing.
mention that.
That's
That
really
should actually be
amazing.
one of the characters I've been on. I've actually been on a project with him.
Oh, you mean on his
Yes, his
animation?
original series.
Wow, that's fire, man. And I hope one day Jude is gonna be on this podcast because that guy is doing an amazing job.
Oh yes.
And the way the voiceovers in his project goes, they are just very, very raw, very Nigerian. You know how someone will be serious, but it's just so funny. That's what I see, and I'm like, I wish we can really get this right. So, do you want to speak to some of these things that I've just said? You know, I like to hear your
Yes.
opinion.
Okay. So when it comes down to the different stories, because it is two, I believe it should be on a three parts. It should be broken down in three parts. That should be the animators, the storytellers, and then the voice actors. Um, the animators are the people who have the imagination of what they're trying to draw, try to represent. The storytellers, in this case, the script writers, are working with the animators on trying to still tell the stories. The voice actors are the people who bring this out to life, who make these characters or these illustrations more real and more personal. And in three parts, I believe if we start tackling from the animator side, we should look at the aspect of the different genres of, regardless of, yes, is animation, It could be dark humor, it could be comedy, it could be horror, it could be uh like a story that's just for a family story. You understand what I'm saying? But the genre is what influences even how the story is told. There's this new animation that came out on Netflix. Zack Snyder directed it, Twilight of the Gods. This is one of those moments I say animations, cartoons is not there are one some for children, and there are some I will not let children watch. This one is one of those animations I will not let children watch. And the storytelling in this case influences how even the voice actors would represent these characters. So, looking at from the ones, a few of the stories that you had mentioned, they were more comical. And somehow, yes, I would admit it because in Nigeria here, humor is our coping mechanism. So a lot of the animations that come out here, and I believe that any animators that's trying to work out some, if somebody have no yab you in this anywhere, it's not Nigerian. It could be offensive, but it's a friendly jab. But it's very Nigerian. And a Nigerian will look at it and laugh. And know, yes, this is us. So in the storytelling, there should be the humor in it, but that is dependent on the genre that you're working towards. So looking at the superhero genre of animations, it has a blueprint. There is this young man goes through some difficult times, takes up, believes he has the responsibility, he's blessed with power, and then he now believes that he has the responsibility to do better with this power. And that's the blueprint. We've seen that happen. So if we're going to do that in a Nigerian setting, it should still be on the somewhat. We should just take that blueprint of the superhero genre and now make it Nigerian. Again, like I said, we don't have giant sharks coming out from Third Milan Bridge. We don't have giant monsters coming out from Third Milan Bridge to wreck Third Milan Bridge. We don't have that in reality. But to further buttress, and this is the weird part about superhero power scaling, is the bigger your feet is how strong you are. You can say this person can throw the moon. If we haven't seen him throw the moon, he can't throw the moon. So if we're trying to make it Nigerian, some people will look at them like this is not realistic. We're not trying to paint realism here. It's not realistic. So, but there are the key elements here that are very Nigerian that would say this is Nigerian. Say a young man, he goes to his uncle or his uncle who is teaching him maybe any martial arts skills, and he goes to him, Egwosa. He greets, the way he's greeting is saying this is Nigerian. The way he even portrays the greeting is saying this is Nigerian. We didn't have to throw it in people's face and say this is exactly how we greet, but just that greeting is saying this is Nigerian. Look at Korean series. You could just walk into your friend's house and their mom or dad is there. You greet them and you say, "Oh, that is you." They're not trying to sell Korean politeness. This is their lifestyle. You understand what I'm saying? So when it comes down to the voice acting part, I feel like there should be an agreement with the animators, the writers, and the voice actors to, as much as we want to follow a certain blueprint that has already been laid out, and we want to tell stories that are unique to us, we follow that blueprint first of all, and now take elements from our reality and make it even more us. Like the speech pattern. If they punch Superman in the face, or maybe something is maybe Brainiac is coming from the skies, Superman will go, "Great Scott!" And Nigerian will say, "Oh, my waiting be this." It's a whole different vibe.
Exactly.
Or someone there, people in the streets, we will see people yelling. in the American movies, we see a child still watching as the thing is falling, and Nigeria will take off. Nobody's gonna be there
Straight
to
up.
watch what is
Straight
going
up.
on. So these are the very Nigerian elements that we could put
Yeah.
into this the stories. I mean, still referencing Judosi's creativity. The last animation that kind of like went viral on TikTok, where he was talking about I think he was trying to do a silent place of it, a quiet place, aliens invasion in Nigeria, and these aliens saw Amapiano, and then they stayed dancing to Amapiano, and the alien was like, Chama, you did dance. Make una for my Chama. That is very Nigerian,
Very
but it's
Nigerian,
out
right?
of this world. These are aliens, but it's very Nigerian. And in Nigeria, we
Yeah.
see this and say, yes, this is us.
Yeah.
So the
Exactly.
language is very important. In
Very.
writing, the language is very important.
Very.
The slang is very important. The charisma, the attitude is very important. Yes, I'm trying to paint this out for in the superhero genre of the stories, but if is a very family friendly kind of story that we are telling in with it doesn't matter whatever the reference of the story is, but it's more, it doesn't have a particular blueprint to say even technology is trying to take over. In Nigeria here, there's certain parts of Nigeria that will be like, people are afraid of technology taking over. We don't even care.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that's those are parts of the stories that will make sense. Maybe
Yeah.
you're telling people, run, technology is stealing our jobs, and you're like, who go fry akara?
Yeah. I get you,
The,
bro. And yeah.
these are just a few things that we just need to, while working on a few stories that are very resonating to our uniqueness. These are things that we should look out for while creating the stories.
I agree with you absolutely. And to also create some balance, first of all, like a good reference like you've used is Jude OC. And I just remembered straight up what Jude OC did with the Justice League, where he Nigerianized these guys and they were freaking funny. And he still had action, he still had, but let's even say Jude's niche is comedy, right? And
Yes.
not the thriller, raw action type of thing, right? Also just got some slack for the animators, right? I recall one of the OGs in Voiceover explaining to me on the Clubhouse meeting we had years back when we newly auditioned for Ianu. So that, for reference, the Clubhouse is the Voice Acting Africa platform that Remy created, and it was saying that sometimes too, you find creators go this route because of business choices, because they want to
Yes.
ensure that the 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 creation, the animation is appealing to a Western audience as well, because they know that that's where more of the money is going to come from. The arguments, I don't know. I feel like
I
it
could
has a
actually stay on that. I could stay on
yeah.
that. And this is the reason why I need the Comnautic podcast, because we could just talk about these things in passing. There is an entire nerd culture in the West when it comes down to animations and comic books. You could see people coming down to analyze these things. And that's how these things get more credibility. Over here, it's quite unfortunate, but it's just a select few, just a few people. And I'm going to still give us credit. We are growing in this, in the cosplaying, in the appreciation of the arts, gaming. We are actually growing. I'm gonna give us credit to that. And the reason why the Comnautic podcast was created is to create awareness to stories like this. Is to talk about, yes, there's a new Nigerian animation that just came out. We're talking about it. We're analyzing it. What happened? This is the kind of nerd culture that goes in there. We're nitpicking it. We're talking about, this is. I would appreciate it if you had gone routes. These are the very, very key points that the reason why the community podcast was created. So that nerd culture would resonate with us. People would say, and I know a couple of people who are also doing the same thing. It's not just me. You're doing that too as well. Mujist Taven is doing that as well. We take out all these stories. Yes, that's the business point of view, and it's more appealing to that side. The reason being that because someone can travel from San Diego and go to Los Angeles for a different Comic Con. Yes, we're doing that here. I could travel from Abuja and come down to Lagos for Comic Con, go to Port Harcourt for Comic Con. It's becoming our culture. The pop culture is growing steadily, but you need to grow at a faster pace where we're no longer trying to appeal to a broader audience. We're making something that we enjoy that the rest of the world can enjoy as well. We're not doing it again. Like this is where I will contradict myself a bit about the blueprint. They are no longer the blueprint. We are doing things that is standard, but we are not trying to please them. Again, still referencing Japanese anime. Japanese anime, I don't think they were trying to please the West. They were doing things that they love. Now the West is trying to adopt that.
Yeah.
So from the business perspective, I get that. But I believe that we here there should be more appreciation. Yes, there is, but it should be more. It should be more. I believe we should be more nerds. Accept your inner nerd. Wear your cosplay and go out.
Bruh, and I think we're gonna get there. Like you said, we should give credit to everybody in this space because honestly, it's not a popular space in Nigeria
Yes.
yet, so everybody that is in this space, we're just trying. Even voiceover as a career is not really like a mainstream, or it's just beginning to go mainstream thanks to the activities in the last 5 years, like the conferences, this
Yes.
podcast, the trainings, the institutions, the challenges, and all those things. Right. So shout out to everybody doing great stuff. Well appreciated. And thank you too for the community podcast that you're doing to, now we're seeing
Thank you.
Comic Cons in Nigeria, and it's just fun to watch and see the things that go on in the Comic Cons, how Nigerians portray characters. And I was it last week I was telling Sarah, or I was saying it in the podcast that I hope that some years to come we would have Nigerian and local and even African superhero stories that we can reference and be very proud of. We already have other African countries too that are catching up and doing amazing stuff, especially South Africa. Sometimes ago I was watching a series of Super Strikers animation, and I was like, wow, this is impressive. Something I used to grow up watching. I mean, reading rather. Right, and there's also some on Netflix. There's one on Netflix like that. I think one or two African. Like it should be one. But anyways, you get the point I'm making. There are people
Yes.
who are pushing and doing this. So shout out to you guys. Tell us a bit about the community podcast before we leave. You've given us the reason why you started doing it. Is there another thing you want us to plug in, right, about the community? You want to plug
Podcast.
in? Yeah.
Okay, so the community podcast it's a passion project where, say, if there's a new project, it's not exactly too reserved for Nigerian projects because, like we had already mentioned, it's still a growing industry. It's a growing industry. So whenever there's a new animated project, a new comic book that drops, we get to talk about it on the podcast. And at the end of every episode, I usually give a recommendation for a few books and where you could find them that you could read, a few comic books that you could read. And it's the idea of the community podcast, like I mentioned, is to really key into my inner nerd. I love talking about superheroes and comic books and animations. A couple of the kids in my compound that whenever they see me, we we really lean into the nerd. We anytime they have questions about superheroes and stuff like that, I'm usually the tiebreaker. They'll come and meet me.
Nice.
Hey, Uncle Ace, can Superman beat Hulk? Well, technically, in some ways, and then I explained all of that to them.
Why?
So that was the idea. I saw myself doing that just in regular conversations. It's super, super passionate. Even sometimes on radio, there was a time we had a conversation of DC and Marvel, and I went ballistic on radio.
Oh my god.
So usually, whenever the conversation, I've found myself doing that even on a regular time. So I was like, no, I need to dedicate this passion to something where people can find an entire knowledge. I have this episode where I think the first season where I got to explain multiversality in the DC and Marvel. You know how there's like different universes and different multiverses, and how each of them are independent but still working together. It's a lot for
I've
people to
listened
wrap
to
their
it.
mind about, but I had to explain that in that particular episode.
Yeah.
So yes, that's
Yeah.
what the Community Podcast is about. It's creating that knowledge for the Nigerian audience. For the Nigerian audience and still for a broader audience out there. But the idea is to, even when someone from any part of the world stumbles across the Community Podcast, they'll be like, yeah, we do have, you listen to it and then you find that there's a couple of good reads in Nigeria, good animations from Nigeria, and you check that out and you're happy to see that.
I really hope, has it been connecting with people like you who are really, really comic nerds? Are you finding them and have you been able to bring them on board?
It's
It's hard, right?
this is where, like I mentioned, it's we're trying to get there. um, so I think Anime Fest, AnimeCon is coming up by December. These are places I go, and that's the person I'm leaning with. Hey, I am Ace Wondaz, voice actor, the host of the Community Podcast. We talk about comics and animations, and they're like, "Wow, yes, awesome, let's get in there." I'm in a few communities on WhatsApp where we literally sometimes I think the last versus match we had there, we had to deliberate. There are nerds. Let me not play. We have nerds here. The last versus match we had on the WhatsApp group chat was Doctor Strange versus Doctor Fate from DC and Marvel, and people were giving. Yeah, I thought I knew comics until people were referencing comics I haven't read. So yes, we do have them, but I need us to come out more. Let's.
There's a WhatsApp group.
Yes.
I feel jealous. That's really cool, man. That's cool. Okay, quick question. Who's your favorite superhero and why?
Now, this is a very, very tough question. It's a very tough question. But let's just keep it in the. I can't say one. It's very difficult to say one. But let's keep it within the Bat family. There's obviously Nightwing. There's Nightwing, and then there's Batman.
Wow.
But the roster keeps getting wider with the Bat family. There's Nightwing, there's Batman, and Alfred.
Oh,
Alfred is not exactly a
Alfred's
superhero, but come on,
of course.
come on, don't play with that man. Don't play with that man.
Character. So I feel like you're a DC guy, are you?
I say that I am both. I'm DC and Marvel because I feel like I like creating the balance between the two. But anytime someone starts leaning towards the Marvel side because Marvel has better movies, I have to come into the defense of DC. Read their comics, watch their animations; they are better.
Oh, you believe DC's animations are better than Marvel?
Yes, they are.
I think,
but everybody gets to see more live action, so they're more biased to that. So I get it.
To be honest, I'm not as deep as you are, but if I want to be objective, right, I think so. Marvel has that, it just has some like really great characters, that very cool hero story that everybody can work with and enjoy. Like, they're just really there. But DC has characters that are just so unconventional. Like, I'm just thinking right now. I'm thinking of the Bat family, like you say, then the Justice League, then the Suicide Squad. Like, they're just so strange, and there's this story around them, and that's the mystique. Like, that mystique is the interesting thing about DC, I think. while the action and the happily ever after, or the the
It's from
glitz and
Marvel.
all of that is for Marvel. So that's my own thought, really. I don't know.
So here's the thing. Here's the difference between Marvel and DC, and this is why a lot of people usually argue towards Marvel. Is that what the Marvel Cinematic Universe has managed to do? It has somehow humanized the superhero genre, and unfortunately, the DC side did not quite do so well with the few movies that are coming out. And so I'm hoping at this point that James Gunn gets to do it from 2025, from from Superman stories coming up from next year. I really hope that James Gunn gets to do that well. But what Marvel over the last 20 years has, last 20 to 15 years has managed to do is humanize the stories. Exactly why people would resonate with Thanos. People would see Thanos and be like, yes, Thanos was right. Read Thanos from the comics. You will not support that man.
I agree with you, bro.
You will not. Thanos just wanted to kill people in the comics because he was in love with death. Just to prove his love for death. That was it. This one is a philosopher. And that's what people resonate more when it comes to Marvel. But it's always a very, very weird argument to argue and say, no, it's not. We're arguing this one, but we're not arguing this person.
I mean,
So it's a very weird place to be at.
it's just the truth, right? Like I get what you're saying. DC's characters, they're just so godlike. I mean, I recall Black Adam, and I'm like, come on, man, this is too much for humanity to handle. But then it's interesting talking about comics with you, man. Animation and all of that. Well done on what you're
Thank
doing.
you.
Let's end on a voiceover note now. You have been in the industry for a couple of years now. I talked about how we both started with the Nigerian voice acting contest. You've also gone ahead to feature in a couple of animation out of Nigeria. You also organized a training this time last year. I should add that.
Yes.
Right. And you've been a
Yes, I did.
facilitator. As a matter of fact, Daza Voiceover, you are one of the facilitators alongside me. So you've got some pedigree as far as the voiceover industry is concerned, for
Yes.
our generation. Let's if you could talk to up and coming voice actors right now, like you could give them some piece of advice, looking at your journey and what you would want them to do or not do. Sadly enough, we are here again. It's just me on the screen. Ace Wondaz has been kicked off. Well, I'll just have to wait. Oh, Ace, you're back.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that based off your journey, from the experiences you've gathered in the industry, to people who are up and coming, just started, what advice are you going to give them? What are the lessons you've learned that you wish they learned early enough as they start?
The first would be completely embrace the passion. Embrace it. It will be the fuel that will drive you for years. Completely embrace it, but don't just stay on it. It's going to be the fuel that will drive you, but don't stay on that. Find bigger motivations that are bigger than you. That could be you could just have a very nice voice, or you just love animations, or you love the way certain people talk. That should be your fuel for the get-go. But find something bigger than you to tether to push you even further than where you are. And that's, for one, my first advice would be the growth of the industry. And the second would be, if you have the passion to create, let that be your driving force. And the third would be, for those getting into animation voiceover, embrace your weird. Embrace it, live it, be it. Really embrace it. Don't be afraid to be silly. Anywhere, while you're recording, while in real life conversations, embrace the weird.
Solid advice, really. Woo! Thank you so much for your time, Ace Wondaz.
Thank you for having me.
You. I could have imagined a different kind of conversation How would I have the amazing Ace Wondaz and not talk about animation and cartoons and characters and all of those, And so I really enjoyed this episode, and I hope some other time in the future we can do this again.
Most definitely, most definitely. Major appreciation. Thank you very much.
All right, man. So that's it for today, guys, on the Everything Voiceovers podcast. If you really enjoyed this episode, which I believe you did, give us a like. If you're watching on Instagram or even on any podcasting platform, give us a like. It helps the algorithm. Drop a comment and subscribe if you're yet to subscribe. Also, give us a 5-star rating, please, especially on Spotify. It helps the algorithm. And please go listen to the Comedic podcast by Ace Wondaz. I'm sure you're gonna have fun listening to it, especially if you're a comic nerd, if you're an animation nerd, or if you just love voiceovers, especially the ones that tilt towards characters and animation. So please do that. We'll drop the link in the comment section. We'll also drop links to how you can reach out to Ace Wondaz for jobs and all of that. But then could you just mention your handle or how else they can reach out to you?
Okay, you can find me on Instagram at Ace underscore Wonders. Ace underscore Wonders. That's ACE underscore WONTAZ. And on Facebook, it's Ace Wonders. And on LinkedIn, that's Ace Akano Charles Junior. Because we have to be more professional on that side.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, you heard it from the man himself, Akano Charles. What's the last one? Excellent.
Extraordinaire.
Extraordinaire. Yeah. Thank you guys for listening to this episode. You can also support the podcast. There's a Show Me Love link in the show notes if you want to support us. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And that's it for episode 58 of the Everything Voiceovers podcast. On to the next one next week. It's Good here again, and I'll see you guys some other time. Bye.